Last month, on October 16th, 2023, the Walt Disney Company turned 100 years old. In honor of this milestone occasion, Walt Disney Animation Studios released a short film titled Once Upon a Studio. Due to the SAG-AFTRA strike at the time, I wasn't able to talk about this short film. But now that the strike has ended, I'm happy to finally discuss this very sweet tribute to Disney 100. In the short, Mickey and a whole bunch of Disney characters that span 10 decades come to life at the Roy E. Disney Animation Building in order to take a group photo for the milestone celebration. Joining me to discuss this short is Disney illustrator Rick Law. If you haven't seen it yet, you can currently watch Once Upon a Studio on Disney+. And if you happen to be at Disneyland, you can catch it in the lobby of the Main Street Opera House. Enjoy our conversation all about Once Upon a Studio.
Grab the confetti and celebrate a Disney anniversary.
Hello, Rick, and welcome back to Disney Coast to Coast. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to see you.
I'm excited to talk about Once Upon a Studio with you. But before we jump into that, why don't you let folks know a little bit, just a brief insight into your work at Disney. We've discussed it before, of course, but just in case folks are hearing your voice for the first time, what have you done with Disney?
Yeah, so I started in 1993 with the studio, and when I first started, pretty much how people know me is I start out kind of illustrating there, doing the covers of the VHSs and the DVDs for, so I did that, and I worked at Buena Vista Home Entertainment for 15 years, and I did a whole lot of those. And then I moved in 2008 to Disney Publishing, where we worked on things called Disney English, building the schools in China. I consulted on Shanghai Disneyland. I developed a whole lot of different products for them over there, and eventually became the creative manager for Disney Learning. So that was all educational material throughout the entire company, would come through myself or my team, and would review that. And then I started working with some of the legends, and I did some documentaries, and just on and on and on.
So lots of stuff.
Yeah, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
And a bunch of these characters you've actually drawn many, many times, whether it was for, a home video cover or something else. You're familiar with these characters, yeah?
Oh, yeah. So, over 30 years. And so there's a lot of the characters that I'm very familiar with. Yeah.
So this short, Once Upon a Studio, was described as a love letter to Walt Disney Animation Studio by the short film's directors and writers Dan Abraham and Trent Corey. So Once Upon a Studio actually premiered at the Annecy International Animation Film Festival on June 11th, 2023, and had its first public viewing on ABC on October 15th, 2023, as part of the Wonderful World of Disney, Disney's 100th anniversary celebration. Of course, the following day on October 16th was the actual 100th anniversary of the Walt Disney Company. I mean, I think that description, a love letter to Walt Disney Animation, is pretty perfect. That's exactly what it feels like to me.
Yeah, it's quite magical. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, I keep telling everybody, bring the tissues, and it's, it feels like a birthday present to all of us, So I was fortunate to be allowed to see it when it was still a work in progress. And I was telling them then, I said, this is going to blow people's minds. There's no other way to put it, because I don't think anybody was prepared that was going to come out.
Yeah, and if anybody listening hasn't seen it yet, it is available on Disney+. And, I had heard from several people like, oh, it's really emotional. And I'm like, yeah, okay, like whatever. But I gotta tell you, I've seen this a few times now. And the moment with Mickey and Walt, like every time, even, I'm not even kidding, and we'll get to this, we'll describe it more later, but even when I was typing up my notes for this episode, when I was just thinking about that moment, I was actually getting emotional. I was like, wow, I'm kind of shocked at how touched I was by this simple little moment in there, which we'll get to.
There's a few of them too. I think for me, there's a few just very special things. And when you tie them all together, it makes it just a unique piece of Disney history and, carrying forward that legacy. So.
Absolutely. Now, one of the writer-directors, Trent Corey, said he actually had an initial idea about Disneyland rides coming to life. And I like the pivot to Walt Disney Animation as opposed to the Disney rides because, to me, when you're celebrating 100 years of the Walt Disney Company, it all started with animation in 1923. The parks didn't come along until much, much later. Animation really is the true start. So if you're going to make a short film celebrating Disney 100, the true correct way to do it is through Disney Animation. So I definitely think the pivot was a very smart one, and I'm very happy that it happened. As much as I love the parks, I think this was truly the best way to celebrate Disney 100.
Yeah, I don't know how long that particular germ of an idea lasted or stuck around, because I know that these guys, Trent and Dan, they conspired basically and did this in secret for months and months and months before they actually went and pitched it to the company. So, that may have been the very, very origins of the idea. And you kind of bat those things around a little bit and stuff. And but I think the pivot, was a good one for it.
Yeah, so 1923, that is the year that Walt Disney signed the contract with M.J. Winkler to produce the series of Alice comedies. And that year marks the start of the company, first known as the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. And that would have been after the Laugh-O-Gram Studios, which had gone bankrupt. So Laugh-O-Gram was before that. Then the official start is the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio, which eventually became the Walt Disney Company and Walt Disney Animation Studios. And the story of this short, it kind of has a bit of a Toy Story feel to it, this concept of the animated characters coming to life after the people leave the building, the same way the toys come to life after Andy leaves the room, which is always a fun concept. But I was thinking about this. Rick, realistically, has there ever been a moment that you can think of where the Walt Disney Animation building has ever been empty of people?
There's many things that are interesting about this short, but it's interesting that the building itself becomes a character in the short to a lesser degree, but than the other ones that they're focused on, the ones that are moving around and stuff. But it is that particular building that is the character. I know as animators and historians, people that I know, when we watch it, it's a little funny because that building hasn't always been the location. Even the first line, you see Bernie Mattinson come at the very beginning of the short, and we all miss Bernie very, very much. If people don't know, Bernie Mattinson, of course, Disney legend, and opens the short. It's dedicated to him. He passed away last year or earlier this year.
February 27th of 2023, he passed away. Yeah.
And Bernie had been at the studio for almost 70 years. He had just passed right before his 70th anniversary. And he really was a lot of the heart of that studio. Bernie had started out as a traffic boy, which is basically a person in the mailroom at the studio very early on. And one of his earliest jobs there was delivering Walt his walking around money, as they would call it, every week. He would deliver him up, take his paycheck or $300 walking around money to, Walt's allowance, basically. And he would deliver that up to Walt, but he eventually worked his way up to become an animator and a director and a story man. And Bernie, really, I tell everybody, Bernie was Winnie the Pooh there because he, that was one of the pieces that he directed. And so he was really kind of the heart and soul, lot of still living there at Disney Animation, of the legacy carried forth, I guess. So anyway, so that's how the short starts, and that is a great tribute to him. But he says his line. That's a whole lot of stuff I just said there to get up to this. But his line is, "If these walls could talk," and that is kind of funny and ironic because that particular building, the Hat Building there on the Disney Studio lot, wasn't opened until I think it was 2015.
No, 1995.
Oh, I'm thinking of the renovation. The renovation was 2014. They started the renovation and finished it in 2016. But yeah, 1995. And so previous to that was of course, the old animation building on the studio lot, which opened in 1940. both have walls that could talk. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I thought the same thing, and I was like, I'm taking this a bit too literally. There's a lot of stuff in this that, it's metaphorical and stuff. I do want to talk before we move on, because I do want to talk about the buildings, but the Bernie stuff, the film is dedicated for our pal Bernie and his 70 years of legendary storytelling at Disney Animation. That is the official dedication. As we said, he passed on February 27th, 2023. We actually both went to his life celebration on June 4th of this year. And you mentioned, you think of him as Winnie the Pooh. And apparently he did it himself as well, because if folks don't know, I think is it every 5 years when you're with the company? I think it starts at year 15 or something, but you get those statues that starts as pins, then it becomes statues. He got the statue and he chose the character he wanted on it, and it was Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, and the reason is he chose that and was because no one else had ever gotten a 70-year statue. No one else had ever completed that task of that long. So there was no template for them to design a statue before Bernie. And so he was involved with designing his own 70th service year statue. And what's interesting to think about, too, is I saw Ellen, his widow, just recently at the Wish wrap party, and we were talking. And Bernie was at the studio longer than Walt was. And, Walt died in 66 and started the company in 23. And so Bernie, figured it out. Like I say, there's only Bernie figured out. Everybody else, it seems like at some point leaves Disney. Even Bob Iger left Disney and came back. But at some point, everybody leaves Disney. Bernie's the only one that had ever just figured out how to stay there and stay there and stay there. So
bless the man for avoiding the layoffs and everything. Like it's kind of remarkable, to be completely honest. But yeah, so at the beginning, as you said, we do see Bernie. We see him with an intern as well. And the symbology here is that he's passing his wisdom to an intern. Now, this intern role was played by actress Renika Williams, which I found fascinating because first of all, I had initially assumed it was just somebody who worked at the studio that they placed in there. And then I looked into it. It's actually an actress. She doesn't seem to have any super huge Disney ties. I was a little surprised by this choice. I'm not sure why they decided to go this way, but they did, and good for her.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I like the representation there, especially in the last few years with the changes in our culture and that kind of thing, the diversity that's being shown throughout. So you kind of have the young and the old right there. So coming in of Bernie and the quote unquote intern. And there is, I have to say too, is the intern thing is, for me, strikes an interesting chord because there is a small group of interns that are actually there at the studio right now that they are training to do 2D. And have been training, and they worked, a lot of them, on Once Upon a Studio, and so
to do 2D animation.
Yes, to do 2D animation. So,
wow.
So again, because the amount of people that are there that still knew how to do that skill were progressively getting older and older and smaller, and so a lot of 2D is just done for special projects or to that they apply here and there. There's a lot of stuff for the parks, that kind of thing. And so they brought in a whole group of interns. It's probably about a dozen or so to teach them specifically, 2D animator interns, basically. So
that's very cool. And if you don't know, 2D animation is the hand-drawn stuff that, I grew up with. And these days it's usually 3D, computer-generated animation. So yeah, keeping that tradition alive, pretty cool. I believe Eric Goldberg is kind of the head of that arena, right?
Yeah, definitely. So he's been helping to oversee that. But there's been others that, like Mark Henn, has been involved. They've been involved as well. So to help pass those skills down.
Very cool. As you mentioned, the animation building really is a character within this short as well. These days, it's known as the Roy E. Disney Animation Building, and it was dedicated as that on May 7th, 2010. Roy E. Disney passed away in 2009. Of course, this is Walt's nephew, and he was a huge advocate for Walt Disney Animation at times when things looked bleak for Walt Disney Animation. So I loved this dedication for him. I remember when it happened, I was so happy that it happened. I was very sad he wasn't, around to see it happen.
Yeah, so Roy was a huge champion of. I mean, he understood that that was the cornerstone of the entire company. The foundation of the company, and so he fought to keep it alive. He used to have, before the renovation on the animation building in the Hat building there, his office, his ceremonial office, as they called it, was in the Hat itself. So if you would go and meet Roy at the building, you go up there on the second floor, and his office, he had a round office in there, and you go in there and meet him. And so that was very cool. So yeah, everybody misses Roy. He was as Floyd Norman says, he's the kindest billionaire you will ever meet. So yeah, everybody misses that guy.
You mentioned the renovation a couple times. I just want to mention, I actually have a piece of carpet from before the renovation. Somebody who was working there, he took a square of carpet for me from the old building. He's like, "Do you want this?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So I have a piece of carpet from the original building.
It's funny you say that, because I know a number of people, including myself, that don't have pieces of carpet, but we do have pieces of the old building. So, or before the re-renovation, because it's the same building. They built that building, and I don't know that they ever really consulted with the animators when they built that building. When it first was built, it was kind of a warren. I always called it kind of the rat's nest, because it was so confusing. Like, you would go through it, and there wasn't really big open spaces, so they could never do town halls or that kind of thing, assemble everybody there all together in the building. It just was this warren of offices and things, and it was just very hard to navigate. I would always get lost in it before the renovation. And I know that the building as well, because of the way it's designed with certain windows and things and stuff, like the air conditioning and heating was always kind of wonky in the building. It would get hot and cold, in different places and stuff. It'd be cold in one part of the building, but super hot in another. And it was just weird. So the renovation was to address all of that. And they spent 2 years, and that really was at the push of John Lasseter at the time. And they created some giant open spaces, a lot of which you see inside. They put the stairwell in the middle. You got the second, the big common areas, they call it, on the second floor, where the coffee bar is and that kind of thing. And you see Pete's Dragon and stuff fly through there. And
it's the patch, right? Isn't
that
the
patch? Although it says the sign, the Snuggly Duckling sign, is there in the short. So
yeah,
it was. I do have to say that the building, for the short, is redressed quite a bit from the way, and I don't want to say quite a bit, but there is redressing that happens for the short to, so certain photos and things are presented in certain ways, and where the layout is pretty much the same. When you go out onto the courtyard, out in front of the building, that's all CG. That's all created differently. When you come right out of the Hat building, the animation building, right across the courtyard is the ABC building, which does not exist in the short at all. And even the studio in the background was kind of shifted, so you could see the water tower kind of directly out the front of the building, which is actually off to it would be off to your right a little bit. So
yeah, it's across the street at the studio, at the main lot studio.
So. Yeah, so it's
creative liberties, Rick. Creative liberties
for the sake of storytelling, But I enjoyed all those little tidbits, because they're Easter eggs upon Easter eggs, is the way I put them, or nods to elements of the past. So even when we first see Bernie and the intern, and they say if those walls could talk, and then it moves to the photos on the wall right there in the lobby, and you see, it's who is it? It's Floyd is there.
Yeah, we got our Disney legend and past Disney Coast to Coast guest Floyd Norman in the top left.
Yeah, you got Retta Scott. There's Mary Blair is there. There's the 9 Old Men, and so there's a story conference. A variety of pictures though from Tyrus Wong. Tyrus Wong is there too. So it's kind of all these nods of the past. There's other photos like that appear throughout the short that aren't there regularly. They those photos do exist within the building. They're just in other contexts. The way that they group them and stuff for the short specifically is very interesting. Even the animator's office, that like when Jeannie and Olaf meet, it's kind of a put together animator's office as opposed to reality.
Well, yeah, they did actually scan the building digitally so that they could recreate it in a computer for this. And I just want to jump back because we got a little off topic, but the Roy E. Disney Animation Building, as I said, that was dedicated May 7th, 2010. Before that, same building was called the Walt Disney Feature Animation Building. That opened in 1995. Now, that is literally across the street from the Walt Disney Studios here in Burbank, California. The main building that, Walt started with, the animation building at the Walt Disney Studios, as you mentioned, opened in 1940, closed in 1985. So there was that window, 1985 to 1995, a decade where some of the biggest classics, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, all made in Glendale in trailers. So,
and the trailers thing, yeah, there were trailers, but it was over on the Airway Complex is what they call it. And there was a bunch of warehouses and trailers so that they utilized. And that's when I started kind of getting to know people and hanging out was over there right before they moved back. My entry to the studio at that point in time. So feature animation has moved all around. Now that's all part of what they call the creative campus over there in Glendale, where consumer products and Imagineering and other facets of the company sit. But yeah, it's had a long history all over the place. With the old animation building on the lot, at the actual studio lot, which was opened in 1940, that again, Dumbo through Black Cauldron was done there. So all the films there before they moved off the lot. And then you had that time period where the renaissance of feature animation basically took place in warehouses in Glendale.
So if these walls could talk, and the trailers in Glendale, and the old animation building, and the Hyperion studio before that. So even before they had the lot, they had the Hyperion studio in Los Angeles. So, once again, figuratively, if these walls could talk. You mentioned when we start in the lobby there, we see the photos of Floyd and the other animators. In the middle is Mickey and Minnie and an animation cell from Mickey's birthday party. And those are the characters that we first see come to life for this special or this short. Some of the other areas, as you mentioned, the Sorcerer's Hat. For folks watching, that's where Peter Pan and the gang, you see them fly up into the Sorcerer's Hat. I love that was Roy E. Disney's office at one point. I've spent much more time in that building since renovation. I did go before renovation, but I don't remember it as well. And maybe it was less memorable. I mean, it's pretty whimsical now.
Well, when John built it, again, before when it was built as offices, and now it's built kind of as a presentation of animation at the same time. So you go through, it shows you the history of all of these 100 years of animation. You go through, you see selections of art from each of the features that has happened. You see murals that go around. So one of the things is when it shows Peter Pan first appears and he's talking to Minnie. Right there there's the restrooms, but if you can see behind Minnie, the wall there off to the right, that's the mural that Claire Keane painted for Tangled. And it takes up that whole wall right there. And so there's these elements throughout the building, handcrafted at times from the different artists over time that serve as kind of not just photo ops, but also a presentation of the history. So that's very kind of cool. So I wish they had a way to display that mural a little bit better, because it's kind of hidden off to the side and when you that one shot.
As we mentioned earlier, that patch area, that giant area, that just huge open space that you see that Elliot Dragon flies through, that is the patch as people know it. And it's just such a fun, every time I'm there, it's just like there's just like I'm sure there are official meetings and stuff happening, but it also just feels like kind of a play place for people to get together. I mean, there are literally board games, there are televisions, there's the coffee shop, there's the cereal bar. It's just like a communal space for people to gather and talk.
Well, I've been up in that space many, many times for different events, whether it's the art event that they do there every year with the caricature show, the town halls, just different parties and receptions, those kind of things and stuff. So the patch, They call it the patch, but it's the longer name is the caffeine patch.
I think there's an even longer name. The official name is the Animation Department Caffeine Patch Cereal Bar.
Yeah. So yeah, because you get your cereal up there as well. So, but people use that space for, as you were saying, for lunch, for coffee, to hang out, or informal meetings, whatever they need. So yeah, but that space is quite impressive, and it serves many purposes there at the studio. So.
Yeah. Let's talk about the characters we see for a bit. Now, there are many of them. There are 543 characters, so we certainly won't get to them all. But it's nice to know they start from the beginning. We get Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in there, Walt's first animated feature, all the way through to Asha from Wish, the most current animated feature. And there, everything is represented in between there. There's some real listen, the favorites are there. Aladdin's there, Belle's there, but we got some random stuff. We got some Treasure Planet, some Oliver and Company, some Rescuers Down Under. Prep and Landing was probably the one, I will say, I certainly didn't recognize them all, so some of them were like surprising in that way to me, but the one that I recognized that shocked me was Prep and Landing, the holiday animated short, has representation in this. The Headless Horseman has representation in this. We have Elliot from Pete's Dragon, Turk, Rosie O'Donnell's character from Tarzan we see. I love that. But yeah, any favorites of yours that were surprises?
Yeah, for me, I rewatched it last night to prepare for this, and I was going to say is one of the ones I connect with a lot is the Headless Horseman prepping in the men's bathroom with all the guys. That's really funny. I love that one because, I have a connection, of course, to Ichabod and Toad because that was one of the early covers that I did for the studio, and just love those characters, period. There's a number of them, and that's what I was telling people before it even came out. I said, you're going to want to watch it 3 and 4 and 5 times because your eye can't take in. There's so many characters and so many things going on at the same time. It can't take it all in of what's happening. And it's so much fun. Every single time you go back, you're going to find something new. You're going to see a character you didn't see before. You'll be like, who's that guy? Where's that? Oh my gosh, that's this from this. And that's that from that. So it really is this magical journey throughout Disney history, So it's just so much fun.
Yeah, here's a list of some even more obscure characters. As I said, I didn't even recognize all of them, but Susie the Little Blue Coupe, Pecos Bill, Bongo, Dodger, Gurgi, Ferdinand and the Bull, Johnny Appleseed, Peter and the Wolf, Alice Blue Bonnet and Johnny Fedora, the Reluctant Dragon, Casey at the Bat, John Henry, and the Robin character from Back to Neverland. The latter character was voiced by Robin Williams and featured in a film that was part of the animation tour at Disney MGM Studios. So, of course, I love that tie. So, I mean, they dug deep, and I love that they dug deep.
And that might be the only character in the short that was specifically created for an attraction.
Perhaps.
I was thinking, is there another one in here? I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think he's the only one there. So
yeah, there's no Figment. There's no, I can't think of any other attraction characters. So
yeah. So that's
perhaps that was even an Easter egg based on the original concept of bringing the Disneyland rides to life. That's how they fit the attractions in there, was that character.
Those guys, I'm sure, just being a big Disney fans, they're trying to figure out all these different ways to shoehorn different things into there. One of my other favorites is the penguins carrying the plate of spaghetti through there. It makes me hungry every time I see that. I'm like, oh, wow. So, but yeah, I love the Mary Poppins penguins as well. So there's just so many neat little touches. It's the first time that you see Oswald and Mickey interact ever in animation. They've interacted, on print before and things since Disney reacquired Oswald, but in other kinds of formats. But in animation, they hadn't done that yet. So this was the first moment that ever happened. That's kind of a cool thing.
That is really cool. I love that. Let's talk about the voices for a second, because of course, a lot of these characters are old. A lot of these voice artists have passed away. I am happy to report that no AI was used to recreate these voices. The voices were either taken from the original source, or perhaps used from a recording from the original recording that was never used in a project, or there were voice doubles or people coming back to reprise their roles. So fascinating use of all different ways of getting these voices together. There were definitely lines that Peter Pan said that I remembered from the film. Even Genie, although I didn't particularly remember the lines from the film, we all know that Robin Williams had a ton of ad-libs and stuff when he was recording. So I feel like there are a plethora of Genie lines. They could probably make a whole other Genie movie and use lines that were never heard yet by Robin Williams. I don't know that for a fact, but
yeah, perhaps. I mean, I know that there was a lot of outtakes and, because he just would ad-lib on and on and on that's the stories that you hear. So I know there's a lot of different stuff. I know they went to the estate. I think that was one of the first people they went to inquire. And apparently the family was all in on it. And they said, sure, yeah, definitely. And I know that was the first, I think the test that they did for the pitch was they had done Genie and Olaf interacting. And so they had used some archival kind of sound recordings and things to kind of pitch the idea and get buy-off on it.
And I've heard Josh Gad talk about this. He was a huge, huge, huge Robin Williams fan. And just the concept of his character interacting with Robin Williams' character was like a huge deal for him. So that's pretty cool. As far as Scuttle, I found this interesting. Scuttle has a small moment. Scuttle from The Little Mermaid has a small moment during, kind of the finale sequence. So I assumed it was just something that they had from Buddy Hackett, but apparently Jess Harnell came in to replace that voice. Iago, similar situation. This was performed by Piotr. Piotr Michael is his name. I don't know if I'm saying the first name correctly, but this may be, I'm not sure, but is this the first time perhaps that character's been performed since Gilbert Gottfried's passing? I'm not certain, but it seems likely.
Yeah, it seems. I would think so. I can't remember any other thing that they put him out in since, or they utilized the character for since. So yeah, perhaps.
But once again, such a small moment. I would have thought it was something that they had of Gilbert's that they could have used, but they actually brought in a different performer for that. For Donald Duck, both Clarence Nash and Tony Anselmo get credit. So Clarence, the original voice, Tony, the current voice, and I guess we're hearing both voices in this.
Yeah.
One thing I was really delighted to see is Paige O'Hara returned for this to voice Belle. And, it's been a long time since that original film. And Belle has been performed by other people since then. As, people's voices age, they're not going to sound like they did 30 plus years ago. So that character's voice has been recast, but so delighted to see that Paige O'Hara was able to come back for this. I'm sure she must have been thrilled.
Well, and I think part of that was it's just the nostalgia of bringing all of these people back in the first place. And so that adds to the magic of this particular piece. And it's getting the band back together. It's the gang back together. It's very cool.
Well, the writer-directors even admitted to, at one point, apparently Ariel, of course, was seen in the film, but she was not heard. And they're like, wait a second, we can't pass up the opportunity to, work with Jodie Benson. So they said, we'll throw her in the finale singing a line. And they did that specifically just to work with Jodie Benson. I'm like, what a cool, privileged position to be in, to just be able to do that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure for those guys too, being giant Disney fans, for them, this is the dream job gig. Listen, we get to now interact and meet every single person we've ever wanted to for this, or at least invite them, if not actually have them in the short. That's pretty unusual.
Yeah. Now, as I was looking through the credits of the voice actors, I gotta say I was shocked by something. And we gotta talk about Mickey Mouse. Because Mickey was voiced by, help me pronounce this, Chris...
I'm
You're bad at this too? Diamantopoulos? I'm not sure how you say it. I know he's well known. I apologize. So Chris D, who voices Mickey in the Mickey shorts, is the voice of Mickey. And by the shorts, I mean like those kind of more adult, what are their official, they've had so many different titles, but the ones that Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is based on. He voices that Mickey Mouse, whereas Brett Iwan, as far as I know, voices him in every other context. I am very surprised to see that Chris was used for this, because it definitely sounds more classic Mickey than Runaway Railway Mickey. This was shocking to me.
I don't understand the mechanics of all of that behind that. I'm not privy to that. But yeah, it's kind of a surprise, I have to say. So I've worked peripherally with Brett, and I've known Brett for a few years. Yeah, so it was just a surprise. So because Chris, previous to this, fans and such had known him just from the shorts, and specifically the Paul Ruda shorts, and until the attraction, of course, at the park. So whether or not this is a shift, whether or not it's just, being that, again, there's so much stuff that happens with Mickey or the Fab Five characters across the company wide. There's that to spread all of that out among one person, it's just impossible. Like, I know whenever we needed something for Brett or them to do, just to get on the schedule to get him to do it, sometimes at that time, I remember it was I think it was around the 50th anniversary of Disneyland, and they were backed up for months with recording sessions. So we were the back of the line, basically, to get his availability. So whether or not that's just the nature of, these characters being spread thin, or these character actors that they need to bring in somebody else, or at least for this particular project, I don't know how that works. So that's character voices runs all of that.
Yeah, it was interesting to know that Chris can do classic Mickey as well, because, his typical shorts Mickey it's more Walt Mickey than Wayne Allwine Mickey. So it was interesting to hear that Chris can kind of do the Wayne Allwine Mickey. But in any case, speaking of Mickey Mouse, let's talk about a beautiful moment that Mickey Mouse has in this short. And this is the moment that, gets me emotional every time I see it. And it's a very small moment, but as all the characters are rushing around trying to get to the front of the building for their big photo opportunity, Mickey Mouse takes a moment alone in a hallway where he sees a giant photo of Walt Disney. And this photo actually does exist in the building, correct?
It's now moved. In the hall, it's shown in a hallway in the short, but it's now been moved. It's right in the lobby, right when you're leaving the building now. So literally on the side of the wall there, kind of like where you see Bernie and the intern leaving. I had never seen that photo before, and I still am unsure where that, because I looked at it up close and I was trying to figure out, is this an oil painting? Is this a archival photo that's been enhanced? I don't know where that photo originated from, but it is a beautiful photo of Walt. It is a very touching moment. It's the Kleenex moment, as I always say, the 3 Kleenex moment. The thing that's, I think, even more special is that particular moment is the soundtrack underneath it.
Yes.
Because it comes in with just those, the lilting little tones of Feed the Birds, which Richard Sherman contributed, of course. That was the famous song and Walt's favorite song from the Sherman Brothers. And the story always was, the history of that was, every day Walt would ask the boys, as he called the Sherman Brothers, to come up to his office at the end of the day, and they would play Feed the Birds for him on the piano in his office for him. So they were able to get Richard to come back and record that, specially on the piano in Walt's office, the restored Walt Disney's office up there on the 3rd floor of the old animation building. And rumor has it, I don't know this for a fact, but I've been hearing that they actually recorded it at the same time of day that they typically would go up and play it for Walt. So the end of the day. And so on that piano, and that is just kind of the chef's kiss of that particular moment, I think. And so it's just those few little notes of the melody there for him, or the chorus of Feed the Birds. So yeah, amazing.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And that was recorded in 2022 at the age of 94 for Richard Sherman. Unbelievable. And of course, Feed the Birds from Mary Poppins. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment. I love when you see Mickey looking up at Walt in the giant photo, you see Mickey's reflection in the glass of the photo, and he just says, "Gotta go, but thanks. On with the show." And I don't know, it's perfect. Like, it's just perfect. I loved it. I also love that another photo we see that I think is very important in this short is a photo of Ub Iwerks over by the elevator. And of course, Ub is credited as, being very much involved with the design and look of Mickey Mouse. So another very important figure in the world of Walt Disney animation. This short is also full of gags. You can't have an animated short without some fun gags. A couple of my favorites include Prince Charming losing his shoe on the staircase instead of Cinderella. I thought that was a very funny moment. And I love the moment when they finally get outside and Goofy has the ladder. And of course, Goofy is, not the most organized person. He's a bit all over the place. And he's swinging that ladder around, and Ichabod from, the Headless Horseman, or Sleepy Hollow, he ducks down so his head doesn't get whacked off by the ladder. And I was like, oh, what a great moment.
Yeah, that's another, again, I have a connection with those characters, a personal connection. So yeah, I just love that they're included, and that it just is, it's perfect. So again, there's so many things in this that are just, you can tell it was made with love. And a love for these characters, and a love for the history and the legacy of the studio itself. And I think that that's what resonates so much in it and with the fans. And so, again, when I saw it, just speaking from a company level, when I saw it as a work in progress, I don't know at the time when they were working on it, I don't know that they had planned I don't know that they thought that the company thought that it was going to get as big of a reception as it has.
Well, I mean, listen, and they've been marketing it like crazy. So they were definitely pushing for this sort of reception.
Now, but at the time, I think the plan, don't quote me, but I think the plan was it was going to be on the beginning of Wish.
I think it should have been.
I think that was the kind of the extent of the marketing of it, was like, oh, here's a short, it'll be on the beginning of Wish, and maybe we'll hype it a little bit. But once people really started to see what it was, this nugget of how amazing it was, they pivoted pretty quickly, and it became, oh, we're putting it on Disney Plus early. We're doing all this. We're putting it on everything now and getting it out there, because it really is a special gem. So it's unique.
I do love that they released it, the night before the actual 100th anniversary. I think that was very smart. They put it on ABC, so it was available to most anybody who wanted to see it. Were there any other gags in there that particularly stuck out to you that you thought were just amusing or fun little nods?
I love Robin Hood taking the bags of money from Scrooge.
Mm-hmm.
When Scrooge drops out, he drops his money bags, and then Robin Hood and Little John come in and take the money bags. So that's one that I love. Yeah, I don't know. I love that the short itself, besides Mickey and Minnie as being the first characters that you see, I love that it opens and closes with Tinkerbell. Just seems perfect as a representation, a character of the whole magical history of the company, being that she opened and closed the Disneyland TV shows and that kind of thing. That character also being very special to me. I like that we get to see as many characters as we do in the short itself, because, like Tarzan and Jane. Tarzan and Jane is not necessarily owned by the Disney Company. It's licensed out from the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate. So there's a lot of, and even Bongo the Bear. So these are characters that the rest of the Disney Company has not been allowed to use for many years, because the rights have reverted back to their rights holder, so that they were able to go and figure out all those and bring them back for this special little pieces is quite amazing and fun. So
that's interesting. I didn't know that about Tarzan. Huh.
Yeah. So Tarzan Jane, that's one of the reasons that we don't have Tarzan's Treehouse anymore. So these are, and we weren't able to do it publishing Tarzan and Jane. We couldn't use those characters anymore after a certain period of time, because again, they were all owned by the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate, and there was a window there that Disney had to use them. And once that expired, those rights all go back. And so now they have to be negotiated individually.
Wow. For all of us out there having a difficult time getting licensing from Disney, they now know that in the opposite case, it can be quite a pain in the butt.
Well, their films are based on books that are owned by other people and other estates and things. So, even for many years, it was, with the Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is written by A. Milne and, those kind of things. So, a lot of rights issues and licensing issues and that kind of thing that go into play there. Disney's pretty much locked up Winnie the Pooh for a long time, but again, there's lots of monies and things that go contracts and stuff. So they're involved.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about this tradition at the finale of this. The whole point of this is the characters getting out in front of the animation building to take their group photo. And I'd love to touch upon this tradition because this is a real thing. Of course, not with animated characters, but with the humans who make these films. And that's a tradition that's been going on for a very long time in front of all the different iterations of animation buildings that the Walt Disney Company has had through the years.
Even going back to Walt and the Alice comedies at Hyperion. I mean, they're on the wall in the short. You'll see a picture of Walt and his crew and little Alice there, Virginia Davis. That's one of the photos that appears in the hallway there. So that's been going on for years and years and years. These team photos and crew photos that happen over time. And so this is now the characters' crack at getting their own team photo, I guess. So
one of my favorites, I could be mistaken, I think it's for Beauty and the Beast. I remember Don Hahn being in this photo, and it was taken in the pool that used to be in front of the Dwarfs building, the Michael Eisner building on the main lot. And what is now Legends Plaza used to be like a reflective pool. And the team actually went inside the pool. It was like knee level water, but they stood inside the pool for the photo. I think it was for Beauty and the Beast. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is. I think is for Beauty and the Beast. So yeah, the reflecting pool in front of the Team Disney building, that used to be there for many, many years before they took it out. The rumor was it was leaking down below in the parking garage, and a lot of geese would fly over and take residence there too. So between the geese and leaking on company cars and such down below, they've eventually removed it, and it's become the Legends Plaza now. That is a famous photo, though. Yeah, great photo.
Now, the whole thing wraps up with a new rendition of When You Wish Upon a Star, where, a lot of the characters have solo lines in it, and it's just this great finale to it. And, there are several Disney anthems, but When You Wish Upon a Star is definitely one of the most iconic and felt very fitting for the finale of this little short.
It starts out, of course, with, after all this craziness that ensues, you have Alan and Dale up there on the sign starting to play just the little plaintive riffs there of When You Wish Upon a Star. And it's just, it's perfect. I don't know any other word to use. It's so hard to come up with words that kind of describe it, because after a while it just feels you're so effusive about it that it's like, oh, it's magical and it's perfect and it's amazing. And
you just start naming the Disney cruise ships. It's a fantasy. It's a wish. It's a dream.
I just tell you, you just have to see it. And once you see it, then you'll know. But again, that's another touch there with Alan and Dale, because we're all very familiar with him from the beginning of Robin Hood and such. So it just feels like some of the things that Trent and Dan did there, in storyboarding it and figuring it out, the interactions and stuff. I don't know that another team could have done it as well. So it comes from an innate love and devotion to these characters and to that legacy and that history. So.
Since you did see an early version of this, was there anything that you saw that didn't make a final cut? Do you happen to remember?
Not that I remember. My comments at the time, whether or not they resonated or not, I don't know, because everything looks amazing to me at this point. Was just that there was some character interactions early on that the scale of the characters in comparison to other characters there was a couple that seemed a little too big as opposed to others. And I mentioned that to one of the animators. So everything was pretty much was there. I know that is it Dan Abraham? I think it's Dan on his Instagram. He's put up a lot of stuff, early stuff from his doing this. So there are some storyboards and things where there was some little bit of changes that happened from storyboard to actually penciling and stuff. Some a couple gags that needed to be dropped and those kind of things, and some interactions that became stronger. But pretty much, it feels like those guys had it from the beginning. Like they knew where they wanted to go with this and had it locked in.
Very cool. Well, that was Once Upon a Studio, folks. It is really fantastic. I highly recommend you check it out on Disney Plus. If you don't have Disney Plus, borrow a friend's password and watch it because it's worth it. And do that before they take those rights away from from us. But Rick, you did get a chance to see Wish a couple of times. Of course, it has not hit the big screen just yet, but the embargo for reviews has been lifted. So just wanted to get, do you have any thoughts on it? Spoiler-free thoughts on Wish?
Well, I guess the word that I would use, which has been used by other critics at this point, is it's magic. Again, it feels like there's a lot of nods to Disney's past in it that a lot of hardcore Disney fans will appreciate. Some of them I'll be surprised if they even pick up on because some of them are very, very subtle. I do tell people that are going to see it in comparison to Once Upon a Studio. This was my one concern was I thought that people have seen Once Upon a Studio were going to go into Wish thinking, oh, it's going to be more of the same. It's going to be a lot of that. And it's not. I'd say to them, it's a new story. Think of Frozen or that kind of thing. But there are subtle references within the environments and things and very subtle nods throughout the entire thing that harken back to Disney's legacy and past. And so, but you're not going to be seeing like Mickey or Oswald in this, like Once Upon a Studio. But we're introduced to whole brand new characters and it is, it's quite amazing. So it's quite magical.
Perfect. Well, Rick, thank you so much for coming on the show. Anything you want to plug before you get going here? Not
at the moment. I guess, we're working on some things, including some stuff for this Disney 100 that's coming up. I can't announce yet.
They're still doing things for Disney 100?
There are stuff that is still happening. Listen, it happens the whole year. This is the whole year.
I guess it did officially just start, right? October was the official start of it, even though we'd been celebrating it since January.
Yeah, we've been celebrating for almost a year entirely now. So it feels like, oh, this is the culmination. Well, no, it's still, we just started. So
it's just the beginning.
So there's some announcements that will be happening, I think, as we go through the year. Some that are really kind of magical. So yeah, we'll just look forward to them.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Rick.
Thank you. So I appreciate being here. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. Don't miss any future episodes by subscribing and following Disney with a Z, coast to coast on your favorite podcast app, where episodes are available 24/7. If you're a longtime listener of the show, thank you. And if you happen to have the means, consider supporting the show over on Patreon. By joining Disney Coast to Coast's Patreon membership, you'll gain access to extra bonuses, including live stream Ask Me Anythings, unreleased episodes, and more bonus content. Take a look at all that's available by clicking the Patreon link in this episode's description, and thank you for considering. And don't miss this month's Ask Me Anything on November 30th. Until next time, anything you need can be found in this episode's description. From additional information and links discussed in this episode found in the show notes, to the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, contact info to reach me, access to the show's official website, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!